Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Health, Environment, Civil Rights, and Engagement Committee for Monday, February 4th, 2019. My name is Philippe Cunningham, and I am the chair of this committee. At the dais with me are Council Members Schrader, Vice Chair Gordon, and Council Member Johnson. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum and can conduct the city's business. I just want to say that I personally think that this committee, I might be a little bit biased, is the best committee out of all of the city council committees, and I think the giant crowd today only proves that point further. So thank you for joining us, everyone. So we have 3 items on today's agenda, including a public hearing. So let's dispense with the single consent item first. Then we will hold the public hearing. Then we will have a presentation on the age-friendly action plan for Minneapolis. So for the one consent item, it is appointments on the Minneapolis, or for the Minneapolis Advisory Committee on Aging Appointments. Before that, though, I want to recognize we've been joined by Council Vice President Jenkins and Council Member Cano. Thank you so much for being here. So I actually want to call Tina Kendrick to be able to give us a little, I like to be able to have from time to time the information about folks who get appointed to our city boards and commissions. They are really talented, really amazing, volunteering their time, and so I want to make sure that we get to have on the record how qualified and lucky we are as a city to have such amazing involved citizens. So if you could give a little bit of background about the folks who are being reappointed or appointed, that would be appreciated.
Chair Cunningham, council members, thank you so much, especially for this opportunity, because I couldn't be more honored and proud to staff our Advisory Committee on Aging with all of the talent and experience and wisdom that my members bring to this committee. Every day I'm just humbled. I'll start off with our new appointments. We have Nancy Johnston, who is representing Ward 7 and is a retired social worker faculty of the U of M, and very active in many organizations, including her neighborhood organizations. We also have Jacob Ames, who is representing Ward 8, currently a program manager at Rebuilding Together Twin Cities, which is a wonderful organization. I encourage everybody to look into them. And also holds a BA from the U of M in Sociology, Spanish, and Global Studies. Our reappointments are Mary Tracy, who is representing Ward 1. She is the author of a research blog called Poking Around with Mary, and also co-produces a cablecast that is archived at the U of M's Institute for Advanced Studies called Voices of Northeast. Richard Cavaney, Dick, who is representing Ward 3, is both a construction engineer and, more noted, retired trial attorney, because it's always very good to have a lawyer on your team. Paulette Will is representing Ward 10. She's a longtime community activist who has also worked in different capacities at the Minnesota legislature and also brings years of community organizing, fundraising, and nonprofit skills to our group. Janet Court, representing Ward 9, has a long background in nonprofits working for the rights of those involved in the criminal justice system, as well as working for civil rights. And she is the newly elected vice chair of our committee. Our mayoral appointments, we'll start with Mark Lucas, who lives in Ward 7 and is currently working for Ecumen, which is a development and housing organization that often focuses on older adults, age-friendly housing, housing where you can age in place, and brings a lot of skill sets and information about affordable housing, as well as a very strong advocate for affordable housing for our aging community. Jim Meyer, who is another mayoral appointee, lives in Ward 11, is a licensed nurse, and just chose that career recently because he's a retired journalist. Works right now for the VA and is also very active in many other city committees. So, yeah. Yes. Janet also is very well known throughout the city with all the service that she provides on many of our committees. And then finally, Rebecca Furman, who is our final mayoral appointee, lives in Ward 3 and apologizes she can't be here. She's our newly appointed chair. She is an IT analyst and has degrees and experience in public administration.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
And on that note, Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. I'm just curious, are there any of the appointees here today? If they are, can they stand and be recognized?
Thank you so much for your time and your leadership. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
All right, so with that, thank you again. I move approval of these appointments and reappointments. All those in favor of this item, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. And the ayes have it, that item is approved. Next, we will move on to the public hearing. Would staff like to come forward to give us a brief overview? Yes, thank you, Mr. Kim Havey. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm very excited today to present an overview of a series of residential energy disclosures that I think are going to be changing the way that buildings are looked at as far as their energy use, and also provide a lot of benefits to our community, including renters, homeowners, and property owners. So our proposed policies are actually made up of 3 different policies that are now housed within 2 ordinances. So we're going to be looking at our multifamily energy benchmarking, which will also look at water use. We're going to be talking about the truth and sale of housing and the time of sale energy report, and a time of rent energy disclosure. The overarching goals with these particular programs are really to fight climate change by increasing the progress on reducing carbon emissions through energy efficiency in our housing sector. These policies will touch on over 90,000 residential housing, both rental and multifamily and single family. We are going to look at correcting market deficiencies by properly evaluating the energy efficiency in the value of the home, meaning that the greater the energy efficiency of a property, the greater value that those homes would have in resale, and greater property values that those buildings would have if they do change hands. Currently, the market does not really effectively look at those particular issues that you can't really visibly see. We'd increase the housing affordability by reducing the total cost of housing, especially for the most energy-burdened households. We'd be improving transparency and consumer protections by providing reliable, consistent advice on a home's energy use, in which we hope will encourage them to take actions and reduce their energy use and costs. And this is also something that will really equalize the information available to both renters and to homeowners. And finally, this is a response to an August 11th, 2018 staff direction to develop a comprehensive set of residential energy disclosures. So why do we need these policies to reach our climate goals? Well, we have very aggressive climate goals. We have a goal to reduce our energy use by 30% by 2025 and 80% by 2050. This is some of the most aggressive carbon reduction goals in the country and across the world. Energy efficiency consistently ranks as the least costly strategy to reduce overall energy use. And 21 other cities, including Minneapolis, have already done some form of energy benchmarking. The city of Minneapolis currently has all buildings, commercial buildings over 50,000 square feet, providing energy data and water use data to the city. We've seen some really good reductions with those particular buildings, but the progress is not happening fast enough, and we need to expand our efforts and really continue to work hard to see those energy reductions happen. As I said, more progress is needed on climate change. We've heard a lot about this from the UN. It is talked about nearly every day in the newspapers, the TV, and on social media. Our current policies within the Climate Action Plan are very good, but they need to be acted on more urgently. And these are policies that are going to act on some of those more urgently. We need to do more to reduce the energy use amongst our housing stock. As you can see, we have 90,500 units of housing, either between obviously from a single family home up to multifamily. And right now, our voluntary efforts are really only reaching 600 to 1,000 homes in the single-family home market, and we're only looking at 30 apartment buildings which are being analyzed for energy efficiency improvements on an annual basis. These particular programs will be increasing those numbers substantially. Within the truth and sale of housing, we're seeing anywhere from 4,000 to 7,000 homes that would go through our energy report process as part of TISH, which would be quadrupling, 400, 500% increase in the number of homes that would be evaluated. So that's a pretty good increase from what we're doing voluntarily right now. And we're also looking at having many more of the multifamily properties participate in our combined utility and city programs to look at energy efficiency for multifamily. Right now we have between 450 and 500 multifamily properties over 50,000 square feet, and we're only actually touching on 30 of them a year. So we need to continue to do more. I also want to speak to the fact of equity within these particular policies. We took a very strong look at how these policies would affect our low-income residents and specifically low-income renters as well as low-income homeowners. We've had a change over the last few years in which now 52% of the residents in the city of Minneapolis are renters. And so those folks deserve to have the same kind of information a home buyer may have. Our vacancy rates are very low, which means it's very difficult to be negotiating on rents or anything like that. And a major part of folks' housing costs are energy costs. And there's no way to know what your energy cost is currently unless the landlord voluntarily provides that information to you. And renters represent 3 out of 4 high energy burden households in the city of Minneapolis. So our time of rent policy that we're proposing today will really start to speak to the concerns we have about full transparency regarding energy costs.
Mr. Havey, if I can jump in here real quick, we have a couple of questions from council members. Okay. Council Member Gordon.
Just quickly, could you give us a definition of high energy burdened? Sounds a little bit technical.
Yes, Councilmember Gordon, Mr. Chair. A definition that varies, but on a national standard, we're talking about a household's income being in excess of 7% of their household income. And in some cases, you'll see energy costs being as high as 30% of a household's income. Typically speaking, an average middle-income household within Minneapolis has a 3% energy burden or energy cost. So a high energy burden is one that's more than double what the average is.
Thank you.
Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. Mr. Havey, I think I heard you say people can negotiate around rent. Having this data would help people to negotiate around their rental fees, or did I mishear that?
No, Councilmember Jenkins and Mr. Chair, I was referring to that it's difficult because of low vacancy rates for renters to negotiate their rent. You know, it's kind of like there's always someone else that could take their place. You have to pay what you have to pay. But at least, you know, in this case, what we're going to be offering is an opportunity to see what your true costs are, which includes your energy costs. We have a lot of homes, as you know, that are single-family homes that are rented. We've had, when the recession was here, a lot of those homes, affordable homes, and in the green zones, both in the north side and south side, were bought up by larger property owners. So we have a lot more rental housing, single-family homes, for example, and those families are paying the full cost of their energy costs. If they don't know what they are, they may be very surprised to find out in January that they have an additional $500 of energy costs than what they thought they did have when they signed the lease in June. So I was actually referring to that's more difficult to negotiate in very low vacancy periods of time like we're in right now, any kind of reduction or changes in your rent.
Are energy costs stable or are they variable? Do they change over time? And I mean, I think I know the answer based on my paying energy costs, that they don't typically stay stable. So it seems to me kind of challenging to say, this is your energy cost.
Councilmember Jenkins. Mr. Chair, what we're looking at doing is working with the utilities to provide an up-to-date annual energy assessment on a per square foot basis based on the building's overall energy costs. So it won't mean that this is your actual energy cost, but you'll have a good sense of what the cost of this building is on a square footage basis and the cost in your apartment as compared to other apartments that you might be looking at. And a prospective tenant can then use that information to determine what's best for them and their budget and which way to.
So it would be an estimate, basically.
It's an estimate, that's correct.
Thank you very much.
All right, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so the last piece that I want to stress is that the Energy Vision Advisory Committee and the Clean Energy Partnership are working with the University of, with the National Association of State Energy Officials and others on a workforce plan, which intends to really tie job creation as a result of these particular efforts with Minneapolis residents and training programs so that the economic development that's happening as a result of these energy efficiency improvements are going to benefit more of the Minneapolis residents. And this is a specific goal within the Clean Energy Partnership current work plan. So just briefly talking about residential benchmarking and evaluations, really what benchmarking is an ongoing tracking system of building energy and water use to ensure buildings are using energy and water as anticipated over time and relative to their peers. The two data silos, as illustrated here, have never been merged before, but by doing so, they provide a relative score to other like buildings called the Energy Star score, which can be calculated for most buildings. Those buildings scoring in the lowest 25% of the similar buildings will be asked to have an energy evaluation, which basically looks at ways that they can reduce their particular energy use. So this is really doing behavioral nudging to try to encourage people to take advantage of the opportunities that a energy evaluation would provide. This information will also be made public and disclosed both in the multifamily side to renters as well as to the public in general to see how those particular buildings are doing. The proposed policy looks at uses the commercial disclosure and rating ordinance to also add in large 50,000 square foot plus multifamily buildings. It includes approximately 440 condo, apartment, and senior housing buildings, and as I said, includes an energy evaluation component. We're proposing to start the first energy disclosure requirements for buildings over 100,000 square feet on June 1st of 2019. Having the information publicly disclosed in June of 2020. Buildings that are between 50 and 100,000 square feet will start their initial compliance by June 1st, 2020 and have full disclosure publicly on June 1st, 2021. So as I mentioned, there's an evaluation component to this, and this is an important piece to what we're proposing. Currently, there is not an evaluation component included within the commercial benchmarking, so this will apply to both multifamily and commercial benchmarking. The goal here is to have buildings with low performance, as I mentioned, within the lowest 25% of similar buildings, perform an energy evaluation. While there's no requirement to implement the measures of those energy evaluations, it will give folks a really good idea of the rebates, the incentives, and the opportunities that they have to save cost and money. We will be phasing in this evaluation period over a 5-year period of time, and our overall goal is to see energy use decline 20% over 5 years. These energy evaluations also will only be required if there is a no-cost evaluation option available. So one of the other things that is important to consider here is that with the 21 other cities that are doing multifamily benchmarking, what we've seen is that the cities that have utilized evaluations, specifically San Francisco and New York City, have actually seen a much greater reduction in energy use. And so while we could have stuck with just a transparency and benchmarking, as a result of the urgent need to address climate change, and because I know the city of Minneapolis is very committed to achieving its emissions reduction goals, we determined it was best to follow the path of those cities that had the most success in reducing their overall energy costs and emissions, and that's why we're including an evaluation component into the multifamily and commercial benchmarking ordinance. Next, we're going to talk about time of sale
If I can
disclosure.
jump in here real quick, I had a simultaneous question. So
Okay.
this time, Vice President Jenkins, you're first.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. I will just note that the cities that were identified are the absolute most expensive cities in America to live in. That's it.
Councilmember Gordon.
I hear it's a little bit pricey to live in Alaska as well, but we'll just take that. Maybe they are the most. I'm not sure where we got that. But I'm curious about the lighting upgrades for 2025 in New York City. Is that something they're requiring in their ordinance?
Within the lighting upgrades within New York City, that I would have, I apologize, Councilmember Gordon, I do not have a specific.
Some of your expert staff behind you are nodding their heads. So that's something that something to keep
So
in mind.
evidently, yes,
forward.
Katie Jones from our from Center for Energy and the Environment has indicated that is a requirement.
Interesting.
So,
Okay, not a requirement that we have in our ordinance at this time.
Councilmember Gordon, that is not a requirement that we have in our ordinance, though it's very likely that those types of lighting upgrades would be recommended in an energy evaluation. And interestingly enough, if you look at commercial and industrial, they are most likely to have not replaced their old light fixtures, and we have a lot of sort of low-hanging fruit or easy to change out lighting opportunities still in our commercial and industrial buildings.
Thank you.
Okay, on to time of sale energy disclosure. So this is working with the existing truth and sale of housing components that we already have that really looking at health and safety. And what we're proposing is by not adding additional FTEs, by not having to do additional or greatly expanded IT work, though we'll be doing some tweaking with that, we're going to be able to implement a TISH energy report. And the energy report will be incorporated into the existing TISH reporting and will be based on data that's provided by the existing TISH evaluators. The goal of this is to provide a report that is understandable and actionable, basically saying these are the types of things that you could do in order to reduce your energy cost and reduce your overall carbon emissions, and provide information about where they can connect with contractors and learn more about what kind of rebates and financing that's available to make those improvements. However, there are no required energy improvements that will be required. This is, again, transparency, giving people information at the time a home is sold about the energy scenario is for their home. It will not actually include energy costs specifically, really just take a look at how it compares to other similar homes and in regards to the types of energy efficiency improvements they currently have. The anticipated start date will be in 2020. So specifically what they're going to be looking at is wall insulation, windows, attic insulation and air sealing, and heating systems. And the Center for Energy and the Environment completed a research study which did include a pilot of homes in Minneapolis to help create the home energy report and the energy score. As I've mentioned, or as has been talked about within the report given for the council action, there are a couple of techniques that will be utilized that will include the drilling of a 2-inch hole in a non-conspicuous area, ideally in a closet space, of an internal wall that has an external exposure. This has been done in thousands of homes throughout the Twin Cities and thousands within Minneapolis without issue. And there's also going to be a blower door test, which is the currently the most comprehensive technology used to be able to determine where the home has its greatest air leaks in order to be able to seal those and reduce the energy loss there. I also wanted to mention that we have consulted with the most common insurance company who provides liability insurance for our TISH evaluators, and they've indicated that there would be no increased liability costs or insurance costs for those evaluators as a result of either taking on the blower door test or the 2-inch hole. The other two areas that they look at when we're talking about attic insulation, they're already taking a look at that if they do have easy access to it, and they're already taking a look at the heating system to determine whether it's functioning properly. We're just going to add a little bit more detail about whether this is an older than 20-year-old system and whether there's an opportunity to increase its efficiency and help you be able to reduce your energy costs for heating. One of the interesting things about this is that we've already got a number of voluntary programs that will help folks take advantage of the findings of these energy reports. One, we do have low and low cost home energy squad visits, and those home energy squad visits will qualify as an energy report at the time of sale. So if you've had an energy squad visit within 2 years prior to your home coming on the market, you will not need to go through a TISH energy evaluation report. We also have an opportunity to provide funding based on our increased franchise fee at 0% for 5 years for loans for energy efficiency improvements, which include most of the aspects that are covered within the home energy inspection report. We also have some terrific utility rebates. For example, Centerport Energy is providing a $1,000 rebate now for wall insulation being completed in Minneapolis homes. CenterPoint is also going to be launching in second quarter of 2019 an on-bill loan repayment program. And this on-bill loan repayment program has $3 million of capital available to it, which will leverage the 0% financing that the City Sustainability Division is participating in. And so there will be great opportunities to be able to finance these energy efficiency improvements using on-bill payment programs and for the most part at 0% financing. We are also working closely with CenterPoint and Xcel Energy as well as the University of Minnesota on developing an inclusive financing program. This is a part of the Clean Energy Partnerships work plan, and the work has already been initiated both at the University of Minnesota, being led by Ellen Anderson, as well as with CenterPoint Energy and a task force of people that have been meeting on a every other week basis to develop the program guidelines. So those are a number of things that we are proposing, as well as I didn't mention assistance with finding a contractor that will help people be able to take advantage of those types of recommendations that come out of the Truth and Sale of Housing report.
All right, let me just jump in here. I have a quick question myself. So you had mentioned with the home energy squad visits that if that had happened 2 years prior, that would then qualify that they would not have to have the additional inspection. If I heard that correctly,
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
All right. So, can you tell me? Because I could have sworn that there was 5 years. Is that for improvements that have already been done within the past 5 years? That then. Does my question make sense? Like, is it what improvements have been done in the last 5 years, and then specifically a home energy squad visit qualifies for 2 years, but is there also a 5-year window? Because I could have sworn I saw that somewhere.
Mr. Chair, I know that other council members have been considering some changes to that. There may be something looked at that would change within the ordinance as it's currently written.
Thank you. I do see an amendment here next to me, so I was not imagining that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. Mr. Havey, do you know, I know there's 0% interest for the energy efficiency improvements to the city. Do we know the interest rate on the on-bill loan repayment through CenterPoint?
Councilmember Jenkins, Mr. Chair, the rate I believe is around 5 to 6%. But you would be eligible to utilize the buy down of the 0% financing for those improvements as well. So the $3 million of capital that's available, we can buy down about $500,000 to $600,000 of that to 0% financing in 2019. So if you're able to take advantage of those, you would be able to also get the 0% financing and use the on-bill loan repayment.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a couple of follow-up questions regarding TISH. So how much will this change in policy? How much will the cost of TISH change for homeowners who are selling? How much would like the overall cost of an inspection increase?
Mr. Chair, we have talked to evaluators about that, and we only really have some estimates based on the current way the ordinance is written. We are estimating somewhere between $100 and $200, though a significant portion of that would likely be related to the blower door test, which would take more time and also require either utilizing or buying a blower door equipment. So that's what we're looking at as far as the additional cost in there. But again, those prices are set by the evaluators, and likely that once they have more experience with doing it, they'll become more efficient and hopefully see those costs be minimized.
Thank you. And so follow-up question. So you had talked about the 2-inch hole in the wall. So something that I've heard quite frequently is folks feel like that's invasive. 2 questions. Can you explain more about that process? Is that typical? Is that a best practice? And then the second question is, are the homeowners able to approve of the location? Like, yes, that closet in that corner is okay, or is it just something that the inspector just chooses on their own?
Mr. Chair, it is a very common practice. It's been done on thousands of homes throughout the Twin Cities. It's typically done in a very inconspicuous space, and many times it's in a closet, and it is capped. So it's not, in many cases, people have had it done, don't even know where it was actually done. There is an opportunity, obviously, if you're there, to meet with the evaluator to choose based on the fact that it needs to be a wall that does have exterior exposure to the location where you would like to have the hole drilled. Generally speaking, the insulation is uniform across the whole building. When it was built, they put some insulation more in one wall and the other wall across the living room not put as much. So they just need to look at one particular hole. And it is needed because we have such a variance in the type of housing stock, everything from housing that was built in 1890 to something that was built in 2017 potentially. So houses that are built after 1980, when the building energy code was put in place, will not have to have the 2-inch hole done in it. Buildings before that, or houses before that, which may or may not have had insulation, and probably before 1960, very good chance they had no insulation put in. Those we do need to take a look at and see what's the amount of space that is available, and if there is actually any insulation in there, in order to give the best estimate of how much insulation would go in and what the actual effect would be as far as reducing the energy cost. So it is needed.
Thank you so much, and this is more of a comment to name to my colleagues, and also just generally speaking to the work you had talked about, job creation that would come out of this. And I just want to make sure that we name that it's important for us to, as we think about every aspect of implementation, to ensure that racial and geographic equity are at the forefront of the job creation and preparing folks who have been marginalized from job opportunities historically, to make sure that we are intentionally aligning that. And a constituent gave really wonderful feedback around there could be more intentional pathways for TISH inspectors of color and being able to diversify that field as well. So just kind of want to name that, and so, because I know city staff are here, and just our commitment on making that happen. So thank you for naming that, and I now have Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. Hopefully someone can speak a little bit more about this job creation aspect of this proposal. Anybody?
Councilmember Jenkins and Mr. Chair, right now we're actually going through an evaluation component of the programs that we have available through sustainability, as well through the health department and energy efficiency and renewable energy in general. We haven't seen the results of that as of yet. And we do have a task force that's working on it within the Energy Vision Advisory Committee. So I can't tell you specifically what training program will be specific to evaluators or insulators or those kinds of things, but we are proposing to have that report available in March.
All right, back to you. Thank you.
Okay. One last component is the time of rent energy disclosure. And specifically what we're looking at here is providing prospective tenants with an energy report on the costs of the energy, heat, and electric that the tenant would be responsible for, being disclosed at the time of application or potentially at the time of advertisement. It is a report that will be developed with the utilities in a form that the City of Minneapolis would prescribe, and that the landlords would not be required to disclose that or have any implications of not disclosing it if the information is not made available by the utility. Our plan is to bring forward a very easy-to-use information through a web portal that will be specific to each of the different buildings. This gives us a little bit of an example of what an energy report might look like. As I mentioned, this is a significant part of our Clean Energy Partnership work plan. It is not something that's easily developed at this time for the smaller properties. Anything under 5 units has some issues around issues around disclosure and data privacy, but we are working with the utilities to overcome those objectives and have that available. This program is intended to be rolled out in 2021, so we do have quite a runway to get this in place and to make sure that it's focusing on the right data. The buildings that are over 50,000 square feet will use the already being disclosed energy benchmarking information, so that for properties that are on average 50 units or larger, we are good to go as far as the information there. And again, we'll be working on an online platform that the utilities have agreed to develop with us as part of our Clean Energy Partnership work plan. So this is a summary sheet that really shows the various different programs and the buildings that they would affect, the goals that we're hoping to achieve, and the requirements that are part of it. It also gives a rough estimate of the time and it would take, and whatever that might be within cost segments, and then also when the projects will be implemented. So as you can see, we're implementing the large-scale benchmarking beginning in 2019 is our goal. Start with TISH in 2020, and then roll into the time of rent at the beginning of 2021. So we've done a lot of outreach and engagement to date on this, as this slide shows. We've had 3 general public meetings. We've published all the information about the disclosures and the proposals that we have on our sustainability website. We've had consultation with national organizations such as the Institute for Market Transformation and the National Resources Defense Council, which are advising us as part of our Bloomberg American Cities Climate Challenge. And we've also had a lot of small group meetings and a number of other meetings along with landlords, city staff, all those types of things. We've had some news articles on it, and of course we have the public hearing. So this is a list of the organizations who have signed on to support this effort, and they include our Energy Vision Advisory Committee, as well as our Community Environmental Advisory Commission, and some of the local organizations such as the Center for Earth and Energy and Democracy, a couple of neighborhoods, Sierra Club, Fresh Energy, and of course Center for Energy and the Environment has been very involved in helping us develop this program and will help implement it as they've done on many other programs. So we've got a lot of good community support from a wide range of different organizations, and we hope that you will also see it as an advantage to our city to have these programs and policies implemented. So I know we've been taking questions along, but if there are any additional questions, I'd be happy to take those now.
All right, do my colleagues have any additional questions? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham, and thank you for this thorough report, Mr. Habey. Do we have an estimate or idea of how much this will cost property owners and landlords in implementing these benchmarks?
Councilmember Jenkins, we don't have a good estimate on the cost individually for property owners and landlords, but by providing the information in an easy-to-use form, we don't believe that it's going to take a lot of additional time to make this happen. For example, on a time of rent, if we're able to utilize the plan that we have, which would be a web-based platform, landlords would really just need to be giving their prospective tenants, along with an application, basically a user and password to their particular property to see that web-based energy disclosure information. That's all they would need to have to do. They would need to probably make a slight change within their application to ensure that they have the signature or add a line in that says the tenant has received the energy disclosure time of rent information, and just signing off that they've done that. But that is the only additional requirement that we'd have there. There is some additional time and energy that would have to be put in on the truth and sale of housing. As we talked about, some of those things are already being done, so we don't see much additional time being there. Moving forward on the blower door or the small 2-inch hole will take some additional time. But when you think about the overall cost savings over the length or lifetime of a house, just insulation alone, attic, wall insulation, air sealing can save a homeowner 30% of their annual energy costs. And on average in Minneapolis, our annual energy costs are about $1,800 a year. So it's very significant. So the payback, if you did implement these, is pretty quick in regards to the energy information stuff. And then on the multifamily benchmarking, we have had good experience with commercial property owners and have not seen a lot of pushback in regards to the time. It does take some time to set up the account initially in the first year with the Department of Energy's Energy Score portfolio manager. But once that's set up, you're basically transferring information that'll be provided in the format needed directly from the utility to the property owner, and that information can then be uploaded and will then be made available to the city. So it doesn't require a lot of number crunching, changing spreadsheets, deciphering data. None of these programs require that. We're trying to make this as seamless and smooth as possible by working upfront with the utilities to provide it in a format that we're requiring as part of the ordinance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that we do ask landlords to do a lot in our community, help people get registered to vote. You got to clean up the snow. Now we have to disclose this rental information, and there's many other things that we require landlords to do too. And these additional things continue to drive up the cost, which was the point I was making with the cities that were identified: Seattle, Washington, D.C., New York City, Chicago. These are, some of the most expensive places to rent in the United States, and certainly we are absolutely concerned about our environment, climate change, meeting our 2050 goals. I just think we have to try and balance those goals with making sure that people can actually afford to live in these apartments as well.
Mm-hmm. Council Member Schrader.
Thank you. I think on that point, I think the point is to make sure that we can actually live and that we can survive climate change. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons to do this. And while I think that while we talk about the cost, this is really I would call it an on-ramp ordinance. It is not requiring any of these upgrades. When we look across the country, other states that have been impacted, I would say, more economically by climate change, more than we have avoided some of those costs for this very short time being, but can see that in our future. They're mandating much more things. We're seeing that in new construction, where California, every roof has to be solar ready. They're looking at fossil fuel free building. Like, all of these things add a lot of costs. They're not doing it just out of like a desire to be more green. They're doing it because they have to. And I'm very proud that here in Minnesota, we're doing something that this is an on-ramp that we are trying to address this in an equitable way, when people have access to capital, when we can be thoughtful, and that the education will go so far, but know that we're on a pretty tight timeline when we get more and more information about climate change. So I'm proud of how we're doing that. I think your point is really well made, that we have to keep this as an affordable city, and I think this ordinance does that. But I actually just put on a different point, put this up. I would be remiss if I didn't take the time to just thank you, Director Abey, for everything that you've done. I think it was very well thought out, and I'll have more to say later, but just want to thank you and your staff for the fabulous work you've done.
Are there any other questions from my colleagues? All right, seeing none, I just want to say thank you so much for this robust conversation, and thank you for your presentation and your work. So now we are going to open the public hearing. I just want to reiterate that the public hearing on the record is for the items 1.1 and items 1.2. So those are around the residential energy disclosure ordinances, just to be clear about what today's public hearing is on. Please bear in mind that each person is limited to 2 minutes. We want to be fair for folks to be able to have a fair amount of time that is equal. If folks have not already signed up and are interested in speaking, please speak to Madam Clerk at the end here to be able to sign up on the list. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'll go ahead and say who is up, and then I'll say the next person so that we can get the person on deck. So first we have Barb Draper, and then followed by Rebecca Olson.
Good afternoon. My name is Barb Draper. I live in Northeast Minneapolis, and I first of all want to thank you for your climate action plan. I think it's terrific, and I'm happy to live in the city of Minneapolis because of that. I applaud you for your goals for reducing greenhouse gases. As I read your reports online, 20% of the greenhouse gases in the city come from residential housing. We've got a lot of homes with heat flying out the walls and the windows. I have 2 granddaughters. I fear for what kind of earth we're leaving them, apropos of your remarks. I am in favor of the residential housing disclosures. I think as we inform people of the true cost of their housing, right now it's kind of a pig in a poke when they go and rent their place or buy a new house. There's a woman in the church I attend, a small Methodist church in Northeast. She's low income. She pays $200 a month rent, and her heat cost exceeds $500. So there's definitely a question of can they afford the housing. I think by things like knowing how much wall insulation there is will lead people to take action to actually improve it once they know what the conditions of the house are. I view this as like an Energy Star rating or a mile per gallon rating on my car. I pay attention to those things. I know other people do. It influences buyer decisions. I think this will influence buyer decisions, and I think it will also influence people to upgrade the heating efficiency in their homes. There'll be pushback on this. I hope you'll stay the course. It's easier to say we're going to lose 20 pounds in January than to actually carry it out. You've stated the goals. Now it's the implement things that are actually going to make a difference. There'll be pushback, and I hope you pass this and stay the course. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barb. We have Rebecca, followed by Zachary Hart.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Olson. I am a newly appointed chair of EVAC, the Energy Vision Advisory Council or Committee of the Minneapolis Clean Energy Partnership, and I'm here today to read a letter on behalf of EVAC that was written to council members and the Clean Energy Partnership Board. The Energy Vision Advisory Committee writes in support of the proposed amendments to the city ordinances that would enable residential energy disclosure. We believe these policy amendments are necessary and important tools that will utilize low and no cost resources to help the city meet its adopted energy vision, as well as its climate and environmental justice goals. These policies will empower Minneapolis residents to understand how much their utility bills will cost as they choose where to live and incentivize energy efficiency that will save money and reduce carbon emissions. As the city deepens its work to improve housing affordability and address equity, it is critical that all residents understand energy costs regardless of their homeowner-renter status or the type of property they live in. The Clean Energy Partnership Board adopted the 2019 through 2021 work plan last November, which included partnership activity EE.5 to support residential energy disclosure policies through data accessibility and tools. A key component of this activity is the city adopting the proposed residential energy disclosure policies in early 2019. So we strongly support the 2019-2021 work plan, the inclusion of this partnership activity EE.5, and the passage of these valuable policies by the city. EVAC encourages the City of Minneapolis Clean Energy Partnership board members and the entirety of the City Council member to support these energy disclosure policies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Zachary, followed by Ben and Ben.
Chair Cunningham, members of the committee, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Zachary Hart. I'm with the Institute for Market Transformation. We're a national nonprofit that supports energy efficiency in buildings, working primarily with cities and real estate companies. I'm also a resident of Minneapolis in Ward 7. I just wanted to say, to be very quick, IMT has acted and continues to act as an advisor to many cities in implementing policies such as the ones we're talking about today. That includes Minneapolis, but also our Midwestern peer cities of Denver, Colorado, St. Louis, Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, and Chicago. To Councilmember Jenkins's point, we've worked now with 27 cities with benchmarking and transparency ordinances. 22 of those cities, their ordinances also cover multifamily properties. In addition to the cities I just mentioned there, Orlando, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Reno, Nevada recently passed. So it's not just the coastal cities where housing is very expensive. This is becoming mainstream, and I applaud the city for its leadership in 2013, passing a commercial ordinance, and I think the step being proposed here would be a great achievement in climate leadership for the Midwest and for Minneapolis in particular. Just a couple points that I wanted to make, which unfortunately I prepared too much information. Collecting and sharing information about the energy performance of buildings is correlated with reductions in energy consumption. I think that's something that's very important for us to note. These policies now, as I've said, available across the country, are starting to show that they're correlated with energy reductions. In Denver, buildings that benchmarked in both 2016 and 2017 have cut their weather normalized energy use by 4.5%. That's saving roughly $13.5 million. In Chicago, as Kim Havey pointed out, a 4.4% reduction has been observed for buildings that have benchmarked over 4 consecutive years. And the multifamily housing sector in Chicago decreased its energy use intensity, so the energy used per square foot, by 6% between 2015 and 2017. And finally, we've seen reductions here on the commercial side in Minneapolis. And I would just point out that the staff has done, I think, a very commendable job of supporting building owners as they benchmark, and we can expect that support to continue if the multifamily ordinance is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Ben and Ben, followed by Alan Campbell.
Chair Cunningham and council members, thank you for the opportunity to share our support for proposed energy data policies today. My name is Ben Rabe, and I'm a senior policy associate at Fresh Energy, focusing on building energy efficiency. As an independent energy policy nonprofit working to speed the transition to a clean energy economy, Fresh Energy recognizes the potential of this proposed policy suite to bolster the city's sustainability efforts by promoting the conservation and efficient use of energy in buildings across Minneapolis. The city of Minneapolis had made great strides towards reducing its greenhouse gas emissions, surpassing the 2015 emission reduction goals, and definitely this is in part to do with the existing commercial benchmarking policy. However, further action is needed to ensure that the city meets its 2025 and 2050 goals. As proposed, energy disclosure policies are critical to help Minneapolis achieve the targets identified in the Climate Action Plan. Xcel Energy has already developed and implemented a portal that allows customers to track their energy usage, and CenterPoint Energy has a similar tool in development. We believe these data portals will serve as valuable tools for multifamily building owners and will seamlessly integrate with city's proposed policy, making the process easier for owners to comply with the benchmarking policy. Additionally, adding home assessments to the TISH energy procedure will help homeowners not only understand their energy costs, which are the third highest cost of home ownership, it'll help homeowners learn the most cost-effective ways to reduce their energy usage and take advantage of Xcel Energy and CenterPoint Energy's robust conservation programs.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Passer. I'm Director of Energy Access and Equity at Fresh Energy. And I just wanted to touch briefly on the energy benchmarking part of the policies, as well as the time of rent policies as well. I think we all have recognized that the city is facing an affordable housing shortage, and I think expanding the city's energy benchmarking policy to multifamily properties would allow multifamily building owners to make informed investment decisions that reduce operating costs, can promote affordability, and improve health and comfort in units. Also, on the time of rent policy, it would really give renters a decision-making power that I think has historically been difficult for renters to obtain otherwise, and would really allow them to make informed decisions about the units that, as we've recognized, are difficult to attain at this time. So I think, in closing, we fully support the City of Minneapolis' proposal. We hope you and the council at large will vote to approve these policies, and we believe that through the passage of the city's proposed policies, Minneapolis will continue to be a leader in sustainability and provide significant economic, equitable, and public health benefits for all its communities for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Alan Campbell, followed by Eric Meyers.
Good afternoon, Chair Cunningham and members of the Peace Committee. My name is Alan Campbell, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Community Environmental Advisory Commission, also known as SEAC. SEAC has voted to support these proposed ordinance changes, not only for environmental reasons, but also because we believe the changes would lead to long-term cost savings for Minneapolis residents. Transportation and the generation of electricity are the two principal sources of climate-changing greenhouse gases in the United States. But the heating and cooling of buildings is a close third. In Minneapolis, residential buildings account for 29% of CO2 emissions. That's from a Siemens report from 2015. I've seen other numbers, but they're all in the 20% plus range. So improving their energy efficiency would be a key step toward enabling the city to reach its climate action plan goal of an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Turning to cost savings, renters comprise over half of Minneapolis' population and are the group most vulnerable to the rising housing costs that contribute to the city's homelessness crisis. Multifamily benchmarking and a time of rent energy disclosure requirement would give renters transparency into the total cost of housing they would be facing. And perhaps more importantly, it would encourage landlords who pass utility costs to renters to improve insulation and make other energy efficiency upgrades that would make the units more competitive in the market. Similarly, the proposed amendments to the Truth in Sale of Housing Ordinance would be expected to result in a net savings for homeowners, as the energy disclosure report would prioritize asset investment recommendations based on project cost effectiveness. 70% of Minneapolis homes lack adequate insulation, and this is a particular problem with homes built before 1980, and these are disproportionately owned or rented by our lowest income residents. If this amendment results in sellers or new owners taking cost-effective measures to insulate homes, it would be a significant boost in energy cost savings and greenhouse gas reduction. Taken together, these amendments would make energy costs more transparent, encourage cost-efficient energy efficiency projects, and would reduce overall heating costs, which are most burdensome to low-income residents. The amendments would also lead to reduced electricity consumption and would thus ease the way to meeting the city's goals of 100% renewable electricity community-wide by 2030 and reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Eric Meyers, followed by Marty, and Pat is on deck.
Chair Cunningham, Eric Meyers. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Eric Meyers, Government Affairs Director for the Minneapolis Area Association of Realtors, representing 8,500 realtors in the Minneapolis area. I'd like to thank you to be heard regarding energy disclosures and the asset rating portion of this Truth and Sale ordinance today. I'd also like to thank Councilmember Schroeder and Gordon for getting us involved early in early stakeholder discussions, and our dialogue on this ordinance has been very appreciated by myself and our members to this point, so I really want to appreciate that. Realtors have long been opposed to TISH programs because monitored financing already includes multiple inspections. In fact, 95% of all buyers who obtain will obtain their own pre-purchase inspections. That said, our Government Affairs Committee composed of members did extensively review the changes of all three ordinances, but we're going to speak specifically to the TISH. We recognize the city and their efforts on the Climate Action Plan. We have the same commitment to sustainability. Realtors, bottom line, realtors, buyers, and sellers are all clearly benefit from more energy efficient homes. However, we do oppose new test requirements for residential property. Adding energy scoring to the truth in sale is not the most effective method of achieving the home energy efficiency goals. And that is specifically because only 3 to 4% of homes are for sale in any given year. This left my members immediately saying, what about the other 96% of all homes? So we believe this program is too narrowly focused on for sale homes. We believe it presents barriers to home ownership, increases transaction costs, lengthens inspection times, and offers a minimal range of effectiveness by focusing on only for sale homes. We believe it creates a competitive disadvantage for Minneapolis homes, and it expands the original scope of the TISH program beyond health and safety. There are concerns about the potential hazards regarding the blower door test on cost effectiveness and the potential hazards. There's concerns about the liability of drilling the 2-inch hole. I think some of that was answered today. That being said, our committee did also offer 6 alternatives, 3 of which the authors agreed were very, very important. We remain committed to those alternatives and working with you on those beyond this ordinance and actions here and today. So thank you very much. Can I jump in?
Thank you very much. All right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Mr. Chair and members. I'm Marty McDonough from the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association. And I'm here mainly just to talk about the process and how fantastic your staff has been. Council members Gordon and Schrader. Carly and Robin have been in touch with our members and held multiple briefings with Mr. Duffrin from the CEE and Katie Jones and Mr. Havey. We've had extensive meetings about this and have been involved in the process, and we're able to give, I think, some pretty good feedback. So the timeline is very generous for our members to get this system in place, and there is, I think, ample assistance being offered from the utilities. And frankly, many of our larger members already do this stuff. I mean, this is a large cost to a larger property, which also is the first ones in, are the largest ones. So we think if it's as user-friendly as it's been portrayed to us, this is going to be a great tool for everyone. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Next up is Pat Paulsen, followed by Chris, and then Lee is on deck.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham and council members. I'm Pat Paulsen, 50-year resident of the 8th Ward, also past resident of 11 and 10, 30-plus year realtor with an office in Minneapolis. I'm also a past president of the Minneapolis Association of Realtors and currently on the board of directors of the Minnesota Association and National Association of Realtors. CenterPoint Energy and their latest report tells me I use 26% more energy than my average neighbors. And that doesn't surprise me. I know who turns the thermostat up, and despite never having an energy audit, I know exactly what the problems are. And so do most buyers. It's not a complicated issue. There's just a few components of the home, and you know, we talk with buyers all the time about these issues and what they can do to make savings. The real problem, the real challenge is getting them to actually spend the money to do the savings. Most buyers plan to stay for less than 10 years, and it's hard to, you know, spend a few $1,000s on something that's going to save a few $100s a year. Now, this is an area where we may be able to help. Our association has long been very active with data. We've created good data tools. We're building a new tool for next generation data that should allow us to do variable isolation. That can lead to telling us what kind of a value increase on your property that energy improvements may be able to make, which can help us and help you persuade people to actually make those improvements. Okay. Another thing with regards to data, we're in a seller's market. Everyone knows that. Most homes are selling. Almost everybody has equity. But not too long ago, less than half the homes were selling, and not too many people had equity. Now imagine spending $600 to $700 on an inspection and your home doesn't even sell. Okay? I've spent a lot of my years working with distressed property owners, losing their homes in foreclosure, that don't have any money. And a lot of these people, this may be the decision that makes them walk away as opposed to try to sell. This will increase foreclosures potentially. We don't know how much, but it could have an impact. But at any rate, we want to thank you. We want to work with you. We are in favor of energy efficiency and informed buyers, and we want to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Chris, followed by Lee Sampson, and followed by Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, my name is Chris Duffer, and I'm president of Center for Energy and Environment. And I want to thank Council Members Gordon and Schrader particularly for bringing this forward, as well as all the stakeholders who participated, who you've heard from some of them already. I'm just going to limit my comments to the truth and sale of housing proposal, although CE supports all of these proposals. This disclosure concept was first recommended to Council back in 2013 as part of the Minneapolis Climate Action Plan. But in addition to being a climate strategy, it also corrects a market failure that occurs because of the lack of visibility of energy efficiency, and it provides a critical consumer protection for a home buyer. If you live in one of the coldest urban areas in America, you should know whether your home is under-insulated. And our decades of experience in this show that approximately 70% of Minneapolis homes are under-insulated. We know from this experience that wall insulation is a particular need, and you've heard from folks about that, I think some, but homeowners will make this improvement if they have a better understanding of it in our experience. To upgrade an existing wall, we use a technique called dense packing, which was developed actually in Minneapolis in the 1980s. It's now a national standard, and this technique saves energy, but equally important, it improves comfort. And it increases housing durability because it blocks the flow of warm, moist air into wall cavities. So several cities have enacted similar disclosure policies. Those cities have typically required a separate home energy audit. And by building upon the TISH inspection, this approach will not require a separate visit, which will streamline it for both the seller and the buyer and add minimal time and cost. What we found in our pilot of this approach last year is that most of the data is already collected by TISH inspectors, so it won't add much additional time. I'll just add, finally, I think Mr. Havey covered wall inspections quite well, but we have been doing this method of drilling 2-inch holes in walls for over 30 years, and it's a common practice both here and across the country. We've done it in thousands of homes, actually tens of thousands of homes. And this is not a source of problems. It's not a source of liability complaints or concerns, and it's a quick process. It takes approximately 5 to 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next up, we have Lee, followed by Mark, and then Todd is on deck.
Chair Cunningham, members of the committee, I'm with the organization Community Power, and want to say Minneapolis has an opportunity to show leadership and be an inspiration to additional cities. I know when I was in the process of buying a home about a year and a half ago, it would have been nice for me to get the miles per gallon equivalent of the house and compare it to other options. It's part of giving residents the information they need to make informed choices when buying or renting. And the way this suite of policies enhances residential energy awareness will incentivize building owners to pursue the energy efficiency improvements that is frequently lacking when the energy and utility costs are passed on to tenants. It'll help tenants get a fair accounting for the total expenses of a home that might not be, or that isn't reflected in the rent. Currently, I like how property owners would only be subject to the proposed ordinance if their tenants are the ones who pay the utility bills, so that the improvements would yield savings to those tenants as utility account holders. And also like to note that an effect of the policies would be to that will build pressure for the utilities to provide an inclusive financing option for doing the actual improvements via the Clean Energy Partnership. It's the proposed policies are important pieces to the puzzle, and that will also leverage existing city processes. And last, I would like to say that to voice support for the workforce development plan, but making an intentional effort so that the job training will be accessible to the residents of the green zones. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Next up, we have Mark, followed by Todd, and Stephanie is in queue.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham, members of the council. My name is Mark Bonhorst. I've been in the same house in South Minneapolis for 40 years. Recently had an energy audit. My reports show that I'm top of the pack. And I was surprised to find out, I needed more insulation in my roof. There was actually an open spot. Air was coming up, and there was frost in my insulation. And so it can be beneficial, even if you think you're, based on the general data, you think you're doing pretty well. I'm here primarily as a member of the Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light Policy Team and First Universalist Environmental Justice Team. I handed in petitions or signatures from 50 people at my church strongly supporting this move. Barb Draper is also a member of the IPL policy team. She just turned in 45 signatures. So I think there's broad support in the liberal religious community for what you're doing, for the tremendous importance to saving our climate, and also in particularly what a great thing this is for equity. The ordinance that you have, the franchise fee ordinance, and what the city is doing with that is absolutely world class in terms of trying to deal with energy efficiency and in dealing with equity. And I think this move now is just hand in glove with that effort. I think it is an on-ramp, as Councilmember Schroeder suggested, a way to expand the awareness that there are lots of programs, especially aimed at low and moderate income households, where we can make major changes in the housing stock, make major impact on global warming, and really improve people's comfort in their homes and the economics. And I have a little spot in my closet where that 2-inch hole was drilled. I have a 1923 house. I know I didn't have any insulation, but it was no big deal. It did take 5 or 10 minutes. And anyway, we really support what you're doing and look forward to continuing to support you as you continue with this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up is Todd Shipman, followed by Stephanie Groover, and Yana is on deck.
Good afternoon, Chair Cunningham and Council. Thanks for having me. I am Todd Shipman. I am a realtor in the Twin Cities. I'm also a Minneapolis resident, the past president of the Minneapolis Area Association of Realtors. I sit on the board of directors at the national, state, and local associations, and I'm also on the executive committee of our local MLS system. I'm also a chair 2018 at the National Association of Realtors Sustainability Advisory Group, which developed a set of strategic initiatives for the National Association that will now be adopted by the state and local associations across the country in order to advocate, like you are, for in support of climate change and the Climate Action Plan and the 2025 goals of the City of Minneapolis. We're here to support you. We're here to advocate for a process and solutions to scale the system and the process which you're developing to a statewide level. The Realtors are 24,000 members strong in the state. We're looking now beyond the city boundaries and how we can advocate and work with the other communities across this state to make this program or whatever you're developing here in this process effective for our members and for the consumer. We're here to advocate for energy audits, assessments, and measurements and efficiencies, but also looking at ways to add value to property. More importantly, how we can make those properties more marketable and interesting to buyers at the time of the sale. We're not opposed to the proposal, and we think the current proposal could use a little tweaking possibly, but in order to help all stakeholders succeed. We are working on a green task force, which is including the builders, the local and state realtor associations, CEE, and the multiple listing service, so that we can be informed and begin to gather that data and that pertinent information for the time of sale and empower our members and the multiple listing service to better serve the consumer. We're working on a way to provide the buyers with energy efficiency information, but also the actual cost of energy in those properties at the time of sale. We're here to educate and inform our members and the consumer about energy advocacy, energy efficiency, and how to best improve their quality of life. We're also here to add value, take action, lower our carbon footprint, and try to do a lot of those things from the realtor's perspective without regulatory effort. We're here to increase results, have a faster pace of adoption, with our residents taking more action in a shorter time frame. Thank you for having us, and know that the realtors have your back.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Stephanie Groover, followed by Yana, and Elizabeth is on deck.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Chair Cunningham and our other esteemed council members. I am a real estate agent. I am a resident of the 4th Ward. I have been through, so many houses over the years. And I agree with many of aspects of this proposal, and I particularly appreciate the acknowledgement that a homeowner could retain control over where that hole is made in their house. I think in order to get the greatest buy-in from the general public, they need to have a little bit of say in this process. I also think that when you're going through this process, we should be looking at the entire ordinance. One of the things that concerns me is that when you read the ordinance the way it is written, there is a misdemeanor that can be applied to not only the homeowner, but also the real estate agent involved in the transaction for not obtaining a truth in sale. And a misdemeanor is something along the lines of, according to Wikipedia, because I've never gotten a misdemeanor, it's vandalism, trespass, or prostitution. So maybe we could reform the ordinance to have a penalty, but maybe not something quite along those lines. I'd also like to propose that you take this one step farther and you look at a rebate program for homeowners of any income in low to moderate income neighborhoods, because so many of these programs that are out there have an income limitation, and yet the homeowners in low to moderate income neighborhoods have overall, in many cases, a lower resale value. The median resale price in Tingletown, for example, is $435,000. The median resale price in Falwell right now, actually according to the last report I saw, was $126,000. That's a significant difference in possible home equity to tap into. Many of the programs already have 48% loan to or debt to income ratios, so a borrower is going to struggle to get access to that money. Many homeowners on the north side want to pay for their improvements in cash, and so a rebate program would be very valuable. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for listening and having this process available to us.
Thank you so much. Always happy to have Ward 4 in the house. Next up, we have Yana, followed by Elizabeth, and Alice is on deck.
Mr. Chair and committee members, thank you so much for hearing this today. I am here speaking as an affordable housing professional who's worked on multifamily energy efficiency for more than a decade, and maybe more importantly, as a mom and pop landlord who will be directly affected by needing to provide the transparency to my future renters. I worked on benchmarking in apartment buildings about 5 years ago, and we had a pilot program that helped more than 500 multifamily buildings benchmark their properties. And the owners found it to be very valuable because they wanted to understand their buildings and provide higher quality housing. One of the challenges they faced was getting the data, and another was knowing what to do with it and how to understand it. And I'm very excited that this particular program addresses those issues so effectively and steers people to opportunities to make that better. Part of why that was important to me is not just the planet, but because we know that renters are disproportionately cost burdened by their energy costs, and especially low-income renters. And so I'm excited that this will work specifically for those folks. Now, in Minneapolis, a lot of them live in buildings like my own building. I own or occupy a fourplex. And I have run my building as a green apartment building because that is what I have thought was the right thing to do. It's healthier for my tenants because we know energy efficient buildings are healthier. It's more comfortable for them. And I can say last week, even though we have an efficient building, it wasn't as comfortable in the house as I would have liked. And then also because it's good for the planet. Now, I've learned, as I've advertised my building as a green building, that tenants really want to know, and they really want an efficient building. You can tell when somebody is looking for their second or third apartment, and last go round, they forgot to ask about those utility costs because they want to know, are utilities included, or am I going to get a $400 surprise bill in January? I am excited about this disclosure because it means everyone will be reminded of that when they're looking for apartments, not just people who were stuck with that excessively high utility bill last year, but people who are also looking for their first apartment building. So thank you for this work. I look forward to offering transparency to my tenants in a new way, and I look forward to working with my neighbors to help them succeed as well.
Thank you so much. Next up is Elizabeth Turner, followed by Alice, and Luke is on deck.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham and council members. My name is Elizabeth. I am an architect and sustainable design consultant. I live in Ward 1 in Minneapolis, and I also do a lot of work in the city, specifically with architecture for affordable housing and energy efficiency. I was a certified passive house consultant for the Hook and Ladder apartments, which are one of the first multifamily pre-certified to be passive house certified, which is going to bring a lot of energy efficiency impacts as well as health and wellness impacts for the residents who are living there. And I also work with single family homes in the city. So a lot of my clients are increasingly asking for energy efficiency in their projects. And one of the discussions that we have, because we are so focused on affordability, is what value are they getting out of that? So for the single family residents, they are getting increased value in lower energy bills and increased health and wellness. But being able to say, well, when you sell your house, people will know that you've gone above and beyond code and are saving additional funds in your project, I think would do a lot of work to help them just make a little initial investment because they know that they're getting that back when they're going to sell. The same side of things on affordable housing, the cost of rent is a really important concern for the developers who are making these projects happen. And if they can know that their renters are going to be able to see the full cost of rental, including energy costs, when they're renting, that helps to incentivize them to make that initial investment as well. I think that this work will help to address not only our climate action plans, but start to make inroads on environmental justice in our city, and thank you for your work to develop this policy.
Thank you so much. Next up is Alice Madden, followed by Luke, and Peter is on deck.
Good afternoon, Chair Cunningham and council members. I am speaking mostly just to support the ordinances today, but also wanted to bring in some points about the implementation and other packaging around these disclosure ordinances. So I'm a resident of Councilmember Cano's ward, and I currently live in an apartment where the laundry machine is on an unheated porch, and we weren't told about it, and so our bill is now skyrockets in the winter because we have to turn on electric heaters so that the pipes don't freeze. So that's like one element of just knowing about what the costs are involved and decisions you wouldn't necessarily make to put a laundry machine on an unheated porch if you were the owner of that property. So I want to thank you for including water into this. That's a really important component of what our resources are and what costs are. I know I've heard landlords talk about water bills as a key issue. And also wanted to just add to the list of people who were throwing their support behind this. I talked to folks at Nokomis East Neighborhood Association who are members of the Energy Efficiency Pilot a year ago, and they're also excited about this set of disclosures. I wanted to just emphasize for the time of rent disclosure that being really important to be prior to application, so folks aren't paying to apply to an apartment that is actually too expensive for them in terms of cost. And also, just from the images about the way that it's going to be, or the format and aesthetics of the disclosure for renters looking at it, I think they look really good, having some kind of committee of renters to be able to say, yes, I can understand this, and making sure that there's language accessibility there as well. I think it would also be great to have other things that folks can do if they don't have the capital at the moment. I think there's a lot of resources available to get folks to have capital. You know, the 0% interest financing and all of that is great. But if there's a second element of this that tells people what they can do just with their hand, like closing drapes and all of those things as well, because a huge part of this is knowing how to use the technology or the technology that's in your apartment afterwards, with programmable thermostats and all of that. And then I would also just like to add two more things. One is just having the city engage at the state policy level to increase the building standard, the building code, because it's always cheapest to do it right the first time. And then maybe having some sort of way of similar to the paid sick and safe time. Just what is the enforcement around this? How do people know that they should be getting this information? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Luke Grunman, followed by Peter, and then Alexis Boxer is on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Luke Grunman. I'm with Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid. I live in the city, but I'm here to speak on behalf of low-income tenants. And we support this piece of this ordinance, these two ordinance changes, but in particular, the ordinance proposal that would make energy costs more available to tenants before they rent. There was some discussion earlier about how the cost of housing might increase because of this proposal. I think, in fact, that the reality particularly for tenants who are low income, is that the cost of energy is already a major part of their housing. It's a big deal. A lot of tenants are in housing court. The tenants we represent are there every day because they're facing eviction that stems from a utility bill. So having that information made known to them sooner could improve the decision making that they do. I have a particular case I wanted to tell you about, a client of mine who is a single mom, 5 kids. She rented a house. She has a voucher. The housing authority agreed to say that she would be responsible for the utility payments, the heat payments. When the winter came around, she was only paying $200 in rent because she had a voucher, but she was paying $500 in heat bills. She requested an audit. The audit then revealed that there was no insulation virtually anywhere in that house. The insulation in the attic had worn down to such an extent that there was basically non-functioning. She had the sort of old newspapers in the walls like I do, but it was, in her case, extremely degraded, and she was spending a fortune on heat. She also had a child who needed more heat in the home in order to for his care needs, and so that made it even worse. Now, the law that currently exists says that landlords should have to maintain a property at a decent level of energy efficiency. That's what the law already states, and so there's a remedy for that particular tenant when we're in court. But most folks, as you guys know, don't make it to court, or they don't have a lawyer to represent them. And so this ordinance, I think, levels the playing field for everyone involved and could make housing a lot cheaper for folks out there. So thank you for the proposal, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated bringing those voices into the space who maybe cannot be here today, so thank you. Next up, we have Peter, followed by Alexis, and Chris is on deck.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Schmidt. I am also a small landlord, mom and pop type shop. We own a triplex and a duplex. And the 3 pieces I just wanted to bring up for these ordinances changes is that I do not find this to be a burden as a small landlord. As was brought up, there's already a lot being asked of landlords. We're already registering folks to vote. For me, I actually appreciate this move because there's a standardization component to it where my wife and I right now are kind of ad hoc doing a lot of these things. After we bought our house, we ended up going through an energy audit, and we found that we only have a double plaster wall. It's back plastered, so there's already a lot of extra considerations that had to go in. And as first-time home buyers, we didn't think about a lot of that going in, so it would have been nice to do that up front. Similarly, we're trying to develop our own in-house energy disclosure for our tenants, which is great and all. I like to think I'm a genius, but I'd prefer it to be standardized in some way to make it so it's just more legible for every new group of tenant coming in as opposed to whatever we think is best presented. And then third, as a small group, having the ability to have access to that 0% interest is really a huge step for us, whereas a small entity, otherwise we can't lend at that same rate. So being able to wrap in our financing to that 0% allows us to be a little bit more flexible with how we're planning long-term assets. You know, I already work in an organization where we're trying to fight climate change. I work in community solar, and you know, the generation side of the climate change fight, the solar side of things, is often seen as pretty sexy. But I'm excited with these ordinances that we're showing a little bit of love to energy efficiency as well. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Alexis, followed by Chris and Marcus on deck.
Good afternoon, Chair Cunningham, members of council. I'm Alexis Boxer. I'm here on behalf of the Sierra Club. First, want to say thank you to all of you for your work, especially to the Office of Sustainability and Councilmember Schrader and Gordon's staff for their work to engage folks in these issues. I'm here on behalf of the Sierra Club. You all should have received a letter from our chapter director, State Director Margaret Levin, on Friday. But I'm here because we believe energy disclosure is a key strategy for Minneapolis's aims to equitably address climate change. If implemented, these low and no-cost policy levers would incentivize more efficiency improvements, simultaneously reducing emissions and improving housing affordability for Minneapolis residents. A multifamily benchmarking ordinance would better equip the city with the information needed to better inform our carbon reduction strategies. We believe time of sale energy disclosure would increase energy transparency among home buyers and sellers, and the time of rent energy disclosure among landlords and tenants. An increased energy efficiency as a result of these policies would lower energy bills, insulating low-income homeowners and renters from unexpected energy costs. Adopting energy disclosure policies would be in alignment with the city's equity goals, the city's 100% renewable electricity resolution, the climate action plan, and the Clean Energy Partnership Work Plan. We support the creation of sound policy that benefits our community and moves us towards commitment to clean energy and sustainability, doing so while centering equity and ensuring those most impacted by pollution or high utility rates are prioritized in both the creation and implementation of such proposals. So thank you all for your work and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Chris Meyer, followed by Marcus Mills, who is the last on the list. So just want to throw out there, if you're interested in speaking, please do not hesitate to head on over to Madam Clerk to sign up. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Chris Meyer, Park Board Commissioner for District 1, and also a very active member of the DFL Environmental Caucus. I was previously the chair of their endorsement committee, and we endorsed most of you. And I'm sure we would have endorsed Councilmember Gordon. If you ever switch parties, we will in the future. But this is exactly the type of issue that we're very grateful that you're all taking on. Given the magnitude of the problems that we're dealing with in climate change, I feel this is a very modest ask to be making of landlords. Indeed, I think you could be making much larger asks. I'm encouraged by Councilmember Schrader's comments. This is an on-ramp, which I hope means that there will be further action down the line. But for now, this is a very good start. I feel it's very empowering to renters like myself to have this information. And you know, Vice President Jenkins mentioned the costs in New York and San Francisco, and it may be true that those cities are expensive places to live, but I feel it's very unlikely that regulations like this would be the cause. If you look back to the chart that staff put up there, the years where those regulations came into effect don't correspond to the years where prices really started skyrocketing. It was long before that that cities like San Francisco and New York became expensive places to live. I feel that a regulation like this might have some upfront costs, but will pay for itself over time. So I really encourage you to take this first step. Thank you.
Thank you. And last up, we have Marcus Mills.
So I'm Marcus Mills with Community Power and out of Ward 3. Most folks here have run into me under one circumstance or another, so I won't belabor that particular point. As I said, with Community Power, and just as you've heard earlier, Community Power is with you on so many of these aspects and has many facts and figures to offer. But today we thought perhaps my story might be a little more informative. In 2002, I was working full-time, paying off student debt and just barely keeping my head above water. As a pedestrian living about 45 minutes from work, I had a wonderful boss who was interested in trying to take some of the burden off of me, and also had a friend who was renting out a particular unit. It was gorgeous, spacious, had every amenity I wanted, and was just inside my price range. I was spellbound. Luckily, it just passed through my head to think, what would the utilities cost? Winter would have broken me. Had I moved in, I would have struggled. I would have strained my boss's relationship with his friend, and I might have endangered my job. I was fortunate that I asked a question. I thank you for working to make sure that future residents need only be fortunate enough to live in Minneapolis. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. So we actually have two more sign-ups. I apologize. Is it Cody Lowry is up, followed by Patrick Hanlon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cunningham and group. I'm a realtor, but speaking only on my behalf, not for anybody else. I just want to thank you for doing this. I think that the reason we're here is because energy costs are so low in this country. If they were higher, we would have done this a long time ago. I have solar panels on my apartment buildings. I wish that I could have those solar panels pay for all of my tenants' electricity, not just mine for the hallways. Maybe one day we'll be able to do that. Fresh Energy is helping to do that in St. Paul. My greatest desire would be to get rid of my gas line to my building. That would get me off of, put me on renewable energy. And I think 20, 30 years from now, we'll be here looking at ways to only heat with electricity, and we won't even hopefully be using gas. I wanted to let you know, and you may know this, that the United Kingdom requires energy efficiency reports for every home that's sold. It's much more in-depth report than this. It's a 4-page return on investment report. It's a great report. Sweden discloses kilowatt hours per use per square meter of use per year in their Sunday ads in the paper. So you can actually compare one condo, they're typically in condos, compare one to the other very easily just by looking at a Sunday ad. The only thing I would ask you on in the energy disclosure for residential is if there's some way you can push it out into the neighborhoods so that we can get to more than just 3,000 or 4,000 a year through neighborhood groups. I don't know if there's any what was it called, RPN money or whatever it's called. If those are all gone, maybe they are. But if there's some way just to push this further and faster, that would be a great thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Last up, we have Patrick Hanlon.
Hi, Chair Cunningham, council members. My name is Patrick Hanlon. I'm the Director of Environmental Programs, and I oversee the energy benchmarking program on the commercial side, and in a moment, depending on how this goes, maybe overseeing the multifamily portion of the energy benchmarking program as well. I just want to give a special thanks out to all the staff. There was a lot of staff involved with this and making sure that we did this right, working with regulatory services, community planning, and economic development. And a lot of folks took on additional work that don't have the dedicated staff that the health department has and sustainability unit has in developing this work. And so I know they're in the audience, and so big special thanks to Andra, Brianna, Doug, Luke, of course Kim, Joel Fussy with in legal, Isaac and Katie in facilitating a lot of this work. Just a lot of work went into coordinating all of this to bring this forward to make sure that we did this right. Nadia and Kelsey, who are in the audience, who will be taking on a lot of this work, should be passed in a moment. And then I also wanted to mention to Councilmember Jenkins one of the points brought up, if I could. Okay. So in the health department, along with other folks like in sustainability, Kelly Molman, we take equity very serious When we look at these issues and the impacts that it might have on issues like displacement and the costs on tenants, we take that very seriously. And one of the issues that we have in getting folks to invest in energy efficiency is that it doesn't add a lot of value to the properties. And that's one of the problems that we have in getting people to be investing in energy efficiency. And so we don't feel that getting folks to look at their energy bills, getting folks to invest in energy efficiency projects is going to cause displacement. And that's one of the issues that we really struggled with and really try to wrap our heads around and looking at other places. And so I just do want to say that that's something that we take very serious, and we feel like this is going to benefit tenants and people in Minneapolis. And so I just wanted to speak to that point. And then, do you mind if I go? Okay, yep. I also want to say that we don't benchmark for the sake of benchmarking. We are doing this with a lot of other resources. We're bringing technical assistance, 0% financing, and then I'll take advantage of a captive audience, is that we have green cost share programs for a 20% match on multifamily projects across the city. So it's a 20% match up to $20,000, and then a 30% match in green zones. So addressing those equity issues in Minneapolis, in both North Minneapolis and South Minneapolis, and that's 30% up to $30,000 in energy efficiency. So we're bringing this all together as programs and coordinating work so that we can drive projects and drive energy efficiency work here in Minneapolis. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and shout out to your team for doing amazing work in all of the discussed areas. So thank you so much. All right, is there anybody else here wishing to speak today? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing no one, we're going to go ahead and close that public hearing. Do any of my colleagues have comments? Yes, Councilmember Schrader.
Well, I'd just like to make a motion to move number one forward for approval.
All right, so we have a motion for, I'm sorry, you just said one? Item one?
Oh, item one with number 1 and 2.
Okay, yeah, just wanted to make sure. All right, so we have a motion on the table to approve the item number 1. With that, are there any comments or questions? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. So a number of the speakers today directed their comments to me, and I'm grateful. I do want to be sure to emphasize that my concern is for low-income residents who live in Minneapolis. And so while this upfront cost may be minimal, there are property taxes, there are rental license fees that are increasing, there are a number of our income stays flat in our society, while all other costs continue to rise. And so I need us to recognize that all of these small costs add up to really substantial costs for our very low income residents who live in this community, who by the time these cost savings generate themselves, they will not be living in this community. And so my only point is for us to have a broad understanding of these impacts. While they will certainly move us forward in reaching our 2050 climate change goals, there will be some casualties. And if we're willing to live with that, so be it.
All right, next up I have Councilmember Gordon.
Well, I actually wanted to take up 1.1 with an amendment. So if you'll notice, there's 2 ordinances that just got moved, and I've got some amendments on both of them. So
how about we start with an amendment for 1.1?
Okay, and this is the rental disclosure, and I think that this is just a minor clarification, and this is in response to some concerns that were raised earlier about what's this report and disclosure, where it's going to be coming from for the smaller landlords. And so it would be adding a section in the time of rent disclosure that would specify, you should have it before you, colleagues, and there's some available over there if you want to read along, but there's a sentence that starts, the property owner or owner's representative shall provide energy disclosure information, and then I want to add this clause, provided to them by the electricity and natural gas utilities which have franchise agreements with the City of Minneapolis. And then it ends with text that's already there in a format prescribed by the City of Minneapolis. People were just wondering where this is coming from, so I wanted to add this particular clause.
Great, thank you so much. And you move that amendment?
Yep.
All right, so we have an amendment on the table adding this additional clause to the item 1.1. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. So now let's move on to 1.2.
Okay, there's a series of 3 amendments here, and we can certainly break them apart if anybody wants to, but I just assume move all of them together. One has to do with the wall insulation. This talks about people spoke about the hole in the wall and putting that in at a little bit of length, and there are some opportunities not to have that. If other technologies are determined, wall insulation R value can be determined by other technologies. Our building official could approve those in the future. I also thought we could add, if there's proof of work that already occurred, this is an idea that Councilmember Johnson brought forward, so I want to add this provision in there that says, an invoice with scope of work from a licensed contractor showing the installation of wall insulation or other reasonable forms of proof as determined by the director may also be used as an alternative for compliance for this portion of the report. Then I have a couple other changes to this section as well. One of them has to do with number 5, and it's actually B5 under the same section. This is the home air leakage. This is the blower door test. This came up a lot in conversations and discussions, and at this point I would like to remove that and strike number 5 from there so that the blower door test will no longer be required. I will just note that from everything we heard, this is the single item that would add cost to the truth in sale of housing provision. It would add some time. We also heard from some of the evaluators that said it's equipment that they don't have. They'd have to get trained. It's not that maybe we can come back with this at some future date. Since I'm already talking about it, I'll also note that I had this test done on my house when I bought it. I also have a hole in my interior wall in a broom closet that I approved the location of, and that plastic plug was put in, and I've never hardly noticed it at all from then on. So I think blower door tests are a fine thing to do, but I don't know that we have to require it at this time. And then the last amendment to this section has to do with the audit and how long it may be used. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. I think I showed you my amendment when it came up. I'd like to extend that to 5 years from 2, as it said in the original language we drafted, to 5. So those, I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify, but those are the 3 changes to this ordinance or amendments I'm moving.
Great. So we have the amendments on the table in items 1.2, 2, 5, and 2. So are there any comments or questions on that? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendments, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that item is amended. Now we're going to go back to overall approving item number 1, and I have Councilmember Schrader.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say a couple things. First, I want to thank everybody for coming. I'll keep my remarks pretty short because you all covered everything I wanted to say. So I also want to thank Mr. Meyer and Mr. McDonough for coming. We do get a lot of feedback from the city when we propose something. Usually it's in the form of a yes or a no. It takes something out extra to say here's an alternative and to work with us. So really appreciate that. Kind of as a segue to that, we don't seem to disagree on the future we want. You know, we want healthy homes. We want a market that works for everyone in this city, that's equitable, and that everyone has access to a comfortable, affordable, clean energy place to live. But the debate is how to get there. And I also want to thank all the speakers that talked about this not going far enough, because unfortunately with the week we had, that's a pretty easy argument to make, and I would have to say you're right. So the challenge we have before us is really how do we do something that is equitable, that people can make that change, that people will not be left behind. I feel that this ordinance does that, and that's really due to the great community support and pushback and working on this, but I also want to take this opportunity to just thank all the community members that took the time to reflect on this, all the staff's time. I really appreciate Mr. Hanlon did the list. I won't do the same list again, but again, there's a lot that goes into something this comprehensive. I also want to spend special thanks to my aide, Carla Weinman, who you all have noted, many have noted already, but it's fantastic. This wouldn't be possible without her. And also Councilmember Gordon. Just really appreciate working with you and with Robin to have something that we're very proud of, and look forward to what we do next.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Gordon, followed by Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you very much, and I'm very excited about this step. I think this is just a small step along the way. It's something we called out several years ago, and we talked about. I think we're building off the success of our commercial benchmarking that has been successful, and we've seen it make a difference. Hopefully this will as well in many ways. As I'm looking back to the Climate Action Plan and also other work that we did that led up to this, including the Clean Energy Partnership, I just want to extend my thanks to former colleague Elizabeth Glidden, who was a partner in all of that work. We wouldn't have gotten to the Climate Action Plan. It wouldn't have been as in good shape. And there's also former staff that worked on that in the past, and also all the work that we put into the Clean Energy Partnership and bringing that forward. I think there's some expectations now we have on that partnership that it's going to help us deliver, so that as people identify the needs in these buildings, that we're going to have some resources that come forward and can help them make those improvements. I will note, somebody talked about the 0% financing in green zones, I think, available to all incomes, and it already is. If you're in a green zone, that everybody can get access to those resources and funds there regardless of income, but we can do more. Other people were talking about there should be more resources for everybody, and I think there's ways that we can do that. We've already proven that we can use our franchise fee for programs and for things that will help us address climate change, and we can. I also want to note that I see this very much as an affordable housing issue as well as a climate change issue. We heard about the cost of utilities and heat, especially from several people, and I think that this is a way to address that. Now renters will have an opportunity to actually go somewhere and they'll understand a little bit more about the costs, as well as home buyers and what they can do there. I know that as more people want to live in the city, that we can look at people who maybe get pushed out because of the rising costs as casualties too, but I think there's also going to be casualties of our failure to do anything about climate change, and there'll be many, and I think everybody is acknowledging that the worst casualties will be those with the fewest resources. The people that are wealthy and can move and can afford things will not be hit nearly as hard. So this is our part to do something, I think, in addressing affordable housing here in Minneapolis, but also looking at how we can address those issues more broadly. I also want to thank everybody who came and spoke about this. It was actually wonderful hearing the different viewpoints. I think we learned a lot from each other here, and I really appreciate that, and it's kind of a sense of unity around this whole issue.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the authors for their work on this ordinance, our staff members, our partners that have been involved with this. I think this is a positive step forward. I appreciate the partnership on the amendments. I know the first two, which are just basically clarifications that I worked with Councilmember Gordon and Schrader on. They were great to work with on that, and I think that the other two are being responsive to a lot of the feedback that we received, and I appreciate the feedback as well from constituents that I got on this, especially early on, that really helped formulate this. I want to thank Council Vice President Jenkins as well for her comments. I think that that's a critical element in regulation and ordinance whenever we're working on policy, that we need to be constantly thinking about all of the unintended consequences of what we are doing. And I support this ordinance today. It's also not lost on me that there are impacts, and so however we can work to reduce burdens, I think is absolutely critical, and look for other areas as well where we can support especially low and low or fixed income residents with this work. I also agree with my colleagues on just how much more there is to do around this. I really want to see us get aggressive on inclusive financing. I know my colleagues are working on that. I know the partnership's working on that and staff are working on that. It's something I hope to be able to help with as well, because so oftentimes it is just very burdensome to go out and try to navigate all of the different opportunities that are available and to try to put together something that works for individuals. And oftentimes that in itself becomes a barrier that's drawn oftentimes along lines of folks with more moderate income or more low income. And so I think we have a lot more we can do there. And frankly, I like to see, as we were looking at a national level and hearing people talk about a Green New Deal, I'd like to see our own version here in Minneapolis, and hope that expanding energy efficiency and solar across the city as much as possible is a huge driving factor behind that. So thanks again, everyone, for your work on this today, and look forward to supporting it, or I'm proud to support it. Thank you.
Thank you to my colleagues. I'll just jump in here and say, really lift up Council Vice President Jenkins' concerns and also share them. I fiercely am protective of my community, and we have a lot of low-income homeowners because it's way cheaper, actually, in some cases to buy and have a mortgage than to rent, especially when we have predatory outside investors charging double what a mortgage would cost. And so it really, this issue, generally speaking, folks of color, Indigenous folks, immigrants and refugees are disproportionately impacted not only by the impacts of climate change, but then the subsequent changes in policies and procedures to then address the impacts of the climate change. And so it's just really necessary for us to always be centering and thinking of the most marginalized folks, because those are the folks who get impacted by those unintended consequences. So how do we get ahead and mitigate it? And I know lots of folks are already thinking about that, and I think it's just necessary for us as marginalized council members in positions of power just to consistently remind folks about the fact that we as policymakers and folks in city staff and folks who are also invested in this work, that we have to be also fiercely protective of the folks who are most vulnerable, both to climate change and the costs that come with mitigating or lessening the impacts of climate change. And if y'all will bear with me for a second, I just have to wonk out a little bit about how comprehensive this policy is. A lot of time legislators will say, pass the policy, and then that's the end of it, and it goes into the ether to then be implemented. But what we see here is the policies, which then turn into the procedures, which then turn into implementation. And within that then is quality assurance and control, so that we can amend the ordinance when we find that there are unintended consequences. So we're able to then amend the policy to mitigate those problems that we saw throughout the entire process. This is good policy making, and I just want to say thank you so much for that, and thank you to the city staff who have been so comprehensive. That is where, because within the bureaucracy, better or worse, we create barriers, and we have inherited barriers, and we are doing the work to dismantle it. And that happens beyond the policy. It happens in the procedures, in the implementation, and in the evaluation. And so, so thank you to my colleagues, thank you to everybody, and thank you for the feedback. This was such a robust conversation, which sometimes when it comes to politics, it's not like that. It's very contentious, and people are for it or against it. But today we heard a lot of yes and. a lot of yes and we find that both and, which is just really amazing because we need to be on the same page about climate change, and thank God we are. We are not dealing with the same kind of issues that we see in the rest of the country, so I do believe that we have the ability to not only lead the country in how we get ahead, well, not even get ahead, but try to catch up with climate change and deal with it, but not only here locally and set the tone for the rest of the country, but then also how do we lift up the most marginalized people who are disproportionately impacted and really show that equity and that health being specifically invested. So thank you to everybody involved with that. And with that, we do have a motion on the table to approve item 1, residential energy disclosure ordinances. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that matter is approved. So now, and thank you everybody for being here today. I heard a clap, so I'm going to go ahead and give that. It was a lot of work, so I'm never one to shy away from a nice round of applause. So our final item for today is a presentation on the age-friendly action plan. So now we have Tina Kendrick coming back up as we have folks maybe transitioning out. Thank you again for coming. Please stay involved with city government. And once you're all set up, Christina, then the floor is yours. All right, so now that we have not so packed of a room, I'm on the edge of my seat, just so you know, for this report. I'm very much so looking forward to it. So thank you so much for coming up here for a second time today. Yeah. The floor is yours.
Yeah, hello again, and thank you so much. Chair Cunningham, council members, remaining council members. This is just a brief update on the activity of our Minneapolis for a Lifetime Age-Friendly Community Action Plan. We were the first city in the state of Minnesota to be designated as an age-friendly community by the World Health Organization in partnership with AARP. So, number one, as we like to be. We do have an actual staff directive of a full report. This is a 3-year action plan, which is finalized in 2019, where we'll go back to the writing table and to the community tables to talk about how successful we were with our recommendations and implementing them both within the city as well as with our partnerships out in the communities. And then move forward, and so you'll see me again, and hopefully it's me and my Minneapolis Advisory Committee on Aging members as we move forward with the next 3-year cycle starting in 2020 with a report on what our new and improved action plan is going to be. So quickly, I will just start off with a little bit of background. The reason why I'm I really like this particular slide is when we started focusing on aging way back in 2014, really targeting, looking at our aging population within the city of Minneapolis. The state demographer's office does not do projections at city level. They do it at county level at the lowest. So I worked with our Hennepin County partners to kind of come up with some math and what that was used for the projections that Hennepin County receives by the state demographers. And the 5-year American Community Survey 5-year estimates were just released in January, so I crunched those numbers and we're not too far off. So our math, I'm very proud to say that our math was fairly accurate. In 2017, the 5-year estimate from the American Community Survey was at 102, just a little over 102. So as you can see, by 2020, using the same growth patterns that Hennepin County uses, we would be roughly around 106,000 individuals in the city of Minneapolis, 50 plus. Very quickly, our background, as I mentioned, we started off with Minneapolis for Lifetime strategy, which was kind of the foundation that led into the action plan. That is also about the time, May 2015, when we restructured our advisory committee on aging. I don't even remember how many seats. It was like 28 seats, voting seats, and it is now down to 17. As you saw, we did a lot of appointments and reappointments earlier today. So it's 17 seats, 13 wards represented, and 4 mayoral appointees. We're almost at 100%. We have a few more seats to fill. And the Advisory Committee on Aging is leading the charge for monitoring the success of our action plan. I actually had Jean Greener, who is our outgoing chair, still on our committee, who had to leave, sends her deepest regrets. Jean gives such a wonderful perspective and has been with the committee for so long in so many different capacities, and had to leave because she is now experiencing a situation of caregiving. As we address, as we move forward in our action plan, you'll hear where we talk about caregiving strategies. So our Advisory Committee on Aging, when we reorganized, we, of course, decided that we were going to put forward a very solid mission statement and be very clear on what our charge is, including informing itself about the community issues, and then act in the interests of our older adults, and generally avoid acting in the interests of particular groups or individuals. So it's across all of our communities. Identify and explore common issues with the City of Minneapolis, as well as our suburban service providers and all of our elected officials. Network and educate elected officials on the importance of selected policy issues relating to older adults and an aging population, using national, state, and local research to build upon the Minneapolis for Lifetime strategy. The ordinances that were passed in the public hearing we just heard today is one example where the Minneapolis Advisory Committee on Aging takes note, takes interest, and thinks about it and how this would affect an aging population and interjecting an aging lens. And then, of course, advise and suggest to the City Council, Mayor, and City Departments on best practices, services, programs, activities, and policies for supporting an aging community. Throughout this entire process, I want to highlight the fact that we've done great engagement from the very, very beginning of Minneapolis for a Lifetime. We even went out into the suburbs to have conversations with older adults to find out if they lived in the city, and if so, why they left, to find out why they left. If they've never lived in the city, do they come and visit the city and access its amenities? As well as asking if they would ever consider to live in the city if they have not. So we really reached out. We went to our cultural communities, utilizing resources to engage with non-English speaking communities especially. And so that's where the evolution of the Lifetime strategy into the action plan. And it is still, I just want to highlight it, community engagement is a #1 priority. And as we move forward to look at how we're going to revise and improve on the current action plan, our priority will be to engage our cultural and non-English speaking elder communities. So in developing our action plan, we did divide into subcommittees. There are 5 goal areas in the Minneapolis for a Lifetime strategy, but for our action plan, we really just wanted to hone in on our housing, transportation, and health and wellness overarching goals. The other 2 goals really had to do with how we do business within the city and to incorporate an aging lens. And then our goal number 5 was to whenever there's opportunity, and even when there's not, to bolster up and highlight the value that our older adults bring to the fabric of the communities they live, work, and play in. And so our subcommittees were charged with the research and gathering inputs. We did have a consultant come in. We were able to gather some resources from an external partner. And so we really just rolled up our sleeves and got to work and did a lot of extra meetings and went out into the community. And each of our advisory committee members tapped their networks and their resources. And of course, use their skills and experiences that they also bring. So we have our recommendations. I did actually report earlier in the year on our accomplishments through 2017. So this particular presentation is just going to highlight some really great successes that we had in 2018. As I mentioned, our staff directive has us reporting a full out of our 3-year cycle. So we'll be getting really in depth at the end of 2019 or early 2020 actually on all of the accomplishments and how we're going to move forward. In totality, there are 22 action steps that are within this plan. To date, we are about 62% completed. And with that, I will move right into highlighting our priority areas, starting with our housing. We have 3 housing action items, and underneath those there are a multitude of action steps. The ones I'll be talking about today and highlighting are the ones that we accomplished in 2018, but the full action plan is accessible online at our department's website. And really, I find that if I just Google the Minneapolis for a Lifetime Action Plan, it pops right up. So as you can imagine, big priority is to provide housing options for all ranges, desires, needs, and budgets, everything from low income to high income. And we also find that a very large gap is within the middle income to where they do not qualify for housing resources. They're just above, but they cannot afford a large amount of accessible, and I do want to stress the accessible housing stock that is available and being built on a daily basis.
If I can, real quick, I just want to jump in to make sure that actually that I am working with Representatives, State Representative Foley around creating a new tax class within property taxes to freeze the property taxes of low-income adults over 65. So just want to let you know we're working on that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. I'd love to, on a whole nother side note, to talk to you about that as well as the programs that Hennepin County does offer for capping their property
Perfect.
taxes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'll jump right in. Goal that was actually introduced when we launched our Minneapolis for a Lifetime. So this has been a longstanding goal, and that's 35 affordable housing units. And I do want to clarify that affordable has a lot of different nuances. So it's not just specifically the median area median income. There's many different components to the affordable housing. But to date, I did a report back from our Community Planning and Economic Development Department that there have been 454 units developed. And while that it only translated into 46% of the wards completed, as you can see, those wards that have already implemented the goal of 35 units have far exceeded it. I think the lowest number was 54 units versus the 35. We also, at the city, have a homeowner navigation program that offers the homeowner resource guide. That's for not only homeowners, but it is for landlords as well. And it's just a multitude of information, including our programs that can help with energy audits and energy efficiency and how to access those programs, down payment assistance. Even more importantly, the rehab programs that are available not only by the city but our external partners to help improve their home. Everything from making it more accessible, such as installing grab bars and ramps, but to doing a little more major of the home repairs, through our Habitat for Humanity programs, et cetera. And of course, we had recommended in our action plan back then to have that the city should consider having a committee that's specifically focused on housing policy and development. And lo and behold, that wasn't a whole lot of work that I had to do or my committee had to do. So that was very exciting when that all came to fruition.
I have a question here from Councilmember Gordon.
Yeah.
And I couldn't resist if you could go back to that last slide. And those are great, wonderful successes. But when you start talking about what wards are completed or not completed, I get kind of curious about what are you talking about? So 46% of wards haven't added 35 affordable units yet. That sounds like 6 wards. I mean, that's like half of the city.
It is 6 wards.
Yeah, and is Ward 2 on the bad side or the good side? What's going on?
I can either run and grab my computer and look it up.
You can even give us that information later, because of course
Absolutely.
a map, we love maps, and we love to see where concentrations are, where they aren't. We love goals, and we love to see what we can do. I think Ward 2 is doing pretty well, but follow-up information would be interesting, at least for me.
Yeah, I would be more than, thank you, Councilmember Gordon. I'd be more than happy to provide all of that information. And I do want to make a note, it's not that the wards are doing bad. It's a challenge for developers to develop affordable housing that is specific to older adults, because there are not the incentive levels that there are at multifamily housing to make it worth it, if you will. I guess I just did air quotes.
And we're working hard and through the housing committee and CPED, we're all trying to move in that
figure that out.
So we want to measure it and see what we're doing.
Yep, and also working with the larger the Minneapolis multi-housing agencies, et cetera, on really taking a hard look at their policies and recommendations as well. So, but yeah, thank you for noting that.
I also have a question or comment from Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. Just a point of clarification, and maybe my colleagues might be able to help too, but because I've heard from different developers that there is, you can't develop housing specifically for seniors, or there's no resources available.
There's no resources.
Is that still the same situation, or what steps are we taking to try to overcome that?
Well, thank you, Council Vice President Jenkins. You can develop housing for older adults only, and even set whatever age limit you want. I take that back. I believe it's 55 and older, depending on how you can request subsidy, if you will, which is different than having the tax increment dollars and all the other little subsidies that go to developers to help them. There is no special resources for senior only. You have to build multi-family affordable housing. So as of today, so that your what you've been hearing is accurate.
And then to Councilmember Gordon's point, I would like to see what has been going on in Ward 8 as well.
Yeah, that'll be the first thing I do right after I walk out of the council chambers, I promise. Thank you.
Councilmember Gordon, do you want to respond?
Well, I could just add a little bit, I guess. The policy is that you'll get much more subsidy and support if it's affordable. So if you have an affordable senior housing, it's all on that income and affordability piece. So then there is assistance. So the city doesn't really have a carve-out policy saying just because it's 65 and over, we're going to give you more. That's something we could think about. If it's affordable, you will. So you can get a nice sweet spot and maybe get access to more funds if it's affordable and it's senior oriented. And then a lot of it, though, becomes marketing. Also, how do you actually build it so it's attractive to seniors and there'll be a market for it, so you'll have renters who want to come and live there. And developers are working on that too.
All right, back to you.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving right along into our priority area 2, which is strengthening and promoting a safe transportation system and options that meets the needs of Minneapolis residents as they age. Here we have 4 action items. Everything from focusing on our external partnerships, such as Metro Transit. I know a lot of our ride call organizations like Uber and Lyft are starting to lean into senior programs, if you will, where it's more accessible to access Uber, not having necessarily to use an app. They're looking at actually having a phone number available for older adults to use and call. Ride-sharing opportunities, you often hear that I don't need alternative transportation. I just need a ride once in a while. And improving the quality and safety of pedestrian travel, that's what I'm really going to highlight in my next slide. And the action steps that the advisory committee themselves have been involved in. And then, of course, promote safe driving and safe road design for older adults. Rides provided through city-supported organizations include our block nurse programs and a few of our other programs that we actually have funded through our city budget, both last year and this year. We have met with Metro Transit. They have come to our committee to provide recommendations. One of our action steps that we're still looking at to try and tackle this summer is to address bus stops within each ward that are very near to communities, whether it be a high-rise that has a lot of older adults in it, or just areas where older adults reside. Just to kind of do an assessment, if you will, of the quality of bus stops. Is it easy to walk to? What's the lighting like? Is there a bench for them to sit down, et cetera? We are very involved with the Transportation Action Plan as well as our Vision Zero. We have not only had those staff meet with the Advisory Committee on Aging members as a whole, but we also have liaisons on each of those of their action committees to provide input, and so to ensure that there is a lens in those initiatives and as those action plans are developed. We even met with our favorite topic, winter maintenance study. We can't seem to have a meeting without talking, especially this time of year, about snow and ice removal. And of course, that leads into, some of the conversations in our Vision Zero and how to have safer pedestrians, the new elevated enforcement and how that's working, especially for our older adults. So we're very, very engaged in a lot of our transportation action plans. We were involved in the Complete Streets and throughout that, and with the passage of our Complete Streets, which is considered a model for focusing on developing age-friendly communities. And we now move into our health and wellness. I saw Commissioner Musican here earlier. She knew exactly what I was here for, so it was very encouraging. There's been some wonderful activities that the health department specifically have taken on within our Minneapolis public housing high-rises that have focused on chronic disease management, smoking cessation, and healthy eating and physical activity and accessing that. They also have been working with my advisory committee on aging on how to get other information and resources to those high rises as we move forward to revise and looking at what we can do to improve our action plan in 2020. We'll really be actively working with our health department and multiple areas to see what we can do beyond our public housing high rises and expand some of the great work deeper into the communities. So whether it be in our community centers, we actually have had a lot of our senior centers throughout the last few years closed with many of organizations like Volunteers of America, et cetera, just simply due to funding and resources. The good news, we've had other partners step up and look at this as an opportunity and to promote and highlight a newer, fun, entertaining place where people can go and get lifelong learning. So Westminster and our downtown library have collaborated. And so I've been working with them as well as my advisory committee members on developing what that would look like and what programs they have. And so they've been up and running for several months now and seem to be doing very, very well. And then, of course, as I mentioned, this is where we really do want to highlight the in-home support services that the city provides financial resources to. To date, or in 2018, we have had 1,600 older adults receive multiple levels of service within these 4 organizations. They include home nurse visits, rides to medical appointments, health and wellness clinics, blood pressure checks, the ability to have maintenance done on their home, As I mentioned before, the installation of things like grab bars, that would be after a safety inspection is done throughout their house. And I do want to also add the value that this is these older adults, 1,600 adults, that translates into an annual cost per service per older adult of only $37. So it really, these organizations really do provide that support and services that our aging community really needs.
I would like to go ahead and jump in here quick. So I just wanted to draw attention to health action item number 3, and that could have a good inherent connection to the Minneapolis Fire Department's mobile integrated healthcare pilot that's happening, because a part of it is transporting folks post-discharge back to their follow-up appointments. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I'm also curious about, has there been conversations around violence prevention and intervention around elder abuse and neglect?
Chair Cunningham, council members, we have had those conversations. At this time, that focus area has not necessarily made it into this 3-year cycle of an action plan, but it definitely has been a discussion on, first of all, like where are those, where are we seeing that, you know, geographically, socioeconomically, and trying to dive in and doing a lot more research. So when we do come up with some recommendations and some action steps, that we have done it based on the best data that we've collected. But yes, there definitely has been conversations. We have had the Better Business Bureau also come in, as well as Tubman, to talk about the Better Business Bureau, of course, was really focused on the scams that older adults are usually often find themselves subjected to. And then, of course, Tubman does do the deeper areas of elder abuse, and they do have an elder abuse hotline, and as well as staff working on that issue. So I do see developing a stronger partnership moving forward to address those issues. Thank you very much for bringing that up. It's a big concern.
Yes, of course. I think long-term I would be very interested in having long-term conversations about how elder abuse and neglect can really fit into our violence prevention and intervention work that's happening through the Office of Violence Prevention. I had one grandparent my whole life, and she recently passed, and it was ultimately due to elder neglect and abuse. And so I just don't want for other folks to experience that, especially when we see that there's a gap. And and so you can consider me a partner in long-term addressing that issue. So back to you. And I'm sorry, but can we? I think we have to get out of here in a few minutes. So.
This is it. This is my last. I've been trying to move it.
Yes, you're doing great.
Possible.
You're doing great.
Thank you. I'm using the Minnesota Let's Talk super fast mode. And so I just want to highlight, these are some of our external partners that we've also engaged with. How that usually happens is we either reach out to them or they reach out to us, depending on what the topic area and or the concern, and have that conversation with these organizations and their staff and our Minneapolis Advisory Committee on Aging, and how it fits in not only with our action plan, but 3 years, a lot of things happen, and so some of these have come up just due to the relevant nature of the issue or topic. But I did want you to know that in 2018, the Minneapolis Advisory Committee on Aging really was able to give a lot of good advice, input, and experience and recommendations to these organizations. And with that, thank you so much for allowing me this time. If there's any questions, as I mentioned before, Chair Cunningham, council members, I will be more than happy to send out to all of the council members and their staff the status of the housing development and how we're moving along. And I think I'm going to tap Mark Lucas, who was appointed today, or reappointed, I should say, can really give has given a wonderful brief education on housing development and how affordable housing. Acumen is now just in the city of Minneapolis, not far from actually my office. And I believe it's the first development that has affordable housing. It's it's designated as affordable housing units, and can really give a great education and that I can share with all of our council members, and especially our housing policy and development staff, who has visited our committee and is coming up with how we can partner and do quarterly updates and give input, so we still can have a lens with our housing policy and development committee.
Great, and if you could let us know as well where seats are still available, which wards need to have an appointee, that would also be appreciated. Absolutely. All right, on that note, thank you so much. That was a very comprehensive and informative presentation, so thank you for all your work. With that, I move to receive and file the 2018 annual update on the Minneapolis for a Lifetime Age-Friendly Action Plan. Are all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and that item passes. Thank you so much. With no further business on our agenda, our meeting is adjourned.
Oh, you're so nice. You stuck around.